Okay, we are live now, so I will initiate, admit the attenders, the participants, and we'll initiate the webinar. They are coming very rapidly. Let's give enough minute. Well, I think we can begin. Let me first of all, in my condition of Icom Europe share, to welcome all of you and to acknowledge to all of you. Our program, participants in general don't know much about our program maybe, but we will begin with the initial welcoming salutations by our president of Icom, Alberto Garlandini, and also then by Lazar Eloudou, Director of Culture and Emergencies in the Cultural Sector from UNESCO. And then I myself, I will make a very brief introduction to the theme. And then, of course, the floor will be for all speakers to speak about. After these initial interventions of speakers, each one of about, let's say, 10 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes, the ones wanting to comment on colleagues, on things colleagues have said before, are free to do so. Just raise your hand. There is a small hand which you can put in the corner of the screen, or just raise your hand, is more human and easier. And then I will also see if there is questions from the chat box. So again, be welcome. It is a pleasure. Of course, yearly our seminar is presential in presence, but we are forced now to have this solution, which is also possible and at the end very practical. Please, Alberto Garlandini, President of Icom, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear President of Icom Europe, dear friends and colleagues, we have hit the first anniversary of lockdowns in Europe. Here now, our lives have been turned upside down. The museum community has faced extraordinary troubles. While some museums have reopened with major limitations, many others are still closed. According to the Icom's global surveys, 30% of museums fear downsizing and 6%. Many professionals, especially consultants and workers, often young and motivated colleagues, and terminations. The theme of 21 Icom International Museum Day is the future of museums, recover and reimagine. In a scenario marked by the crisis of mass tourism, fewer resources, and the persistent sanitary restrictions, many museums have to reconsider their business models, reinvent their social and educational role, rethink exhibition policies, and focus on proximity tourism. The key words for the future are innovation and participation, diversity and cooperation. The pandemic has dramatically increased inequalities. In a world where 41% of the population are not active internet users, digital illiteracy and the inadequacy of digital infrastructures have widened disparities in access to heritage and in participation to cultural life. Museums have strengthened their digital outreach, have developed new hybrid forms of cultural experience, have proved that they may be a driving reference for citizens in times of uncertainty, isolation, and fake news. Last year, Icom has issued ethical, scientific, and social recommendations on reopening, security, conservation, community resilience, and digitization. Icom has also launched 2 calls for Icom solidarity projects to support museums' resilience with an endowment of 360,000 euros. More than 50% of museums complain that so far they have received neither direct nor indirect financial support from governments. Icom is advocating for emergency fund at all international tables. I have recently spoken at the conferences of UNESCO, of the G20 countries, of UNIDROIT and OECD, of the Portuguese presidency of the Council of European Union, so that museums and heritage are kept in the agendas of decision makers. Icom wants to send this message. Museums are bridges between people and cultures. Museums diversity and innovate to respond to social, economic, and environmental challenges. Icom is calling museums to lead the change. Now is the time to take new responsibility. Now is the time for unity and cooperation. Thanks for your attention.
Thanks very much, Alberto. I will pass immediately the floor to Lazar Eloudou from UNESCO. Please, and thank you very much to be with us.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor.
The floor is yours, Lazar. You can intervene.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Let me first start by warmly congratulate Icom and Icom Europe for this timely and necessary initiative. I really want to express my thanks to both you, Mr. Garlandini and Mr. Raposo, for your kind invitation. It's my great pleasure to join all of you today to discuss, of course, the future of Europe's big museums in the wake of the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. I want to start by saying that UNESCO and Icom are long-standing partners in the field of museums, and we all share the common goals to support the development of museums worldwide and promote peace, cultural dialogue, social equality, and sustainable development through the diversity of museums and collections. I am especially glad to see that during the difficult pandemic times, as said by Professor Garlandini, our partnership has been further strengthened through our joint cooperation against the challenges that museums have been facing since 1 year. UNESCO has always brought special attention on museums as the most important institutions to safeguard tangible, intangible, cultural, and natural heritage. That's why I want to say that the 2015 recommendation on museums and collections, for which Icom has been a very important contributor, has never been more relevant than today. However, the pandemic has severely impacted museums and interrupted museums' fundamental functions around the globe, and we have seen it in all the regions. Museums in Europe have been especially impacted, in particular what we call the big museums. And that since March 2020, they have experienced over the past months, almost 8 months of closures, and many are still closed till this day and witnessed a drastic drop of visitors. The magnitude of financial and operational difficulties has led to full reduction of activities, layoff of staff, and put the whole ecosystem around museums at stake. The pandemic has also made museums more vulnerable to other risks, such as illicit trafficking and theft, when important museums have reported the loss of valuable artworks. And the social crisis exacerbated by the pandemic, such as race and gender inequality, have resulted for many museums to reflect stronger upon their essential role for social justice and inclusion. So I can not but agree with Professor Garlandini when he says that museums have today to reassess their social and education role. Since the beginning of the pandemic, UNESCO has assessed the situation by a first report published in May 2020, titled Museums Around the World in the Face of COVID-19, that we are actually updating these days, and also over 250 UNESCO resilient online debates in over 110 countries across the globe, including several debates that we conducted on museums. So since the beginning of the pandemic, our organization also implemented many on-the-ground actions to support the rehabilitation and the capacity development for museums worldwide. For example, recently, last February, by supporting the Iraq National Museums in Baghdad, or via joint webinar sessions with our partners Icom and Icom, that brought together over 100 museums professionals from Africa, in particular Kenya, Madagascar, Rwanda, Somalia, Tanzania, or Uganda, and this to support distant education of museums and promote reorg methodology for preventive conservation of museums collections. This is also an opportunity to say that on 18th of March, UNESCO organized an online debate reflection of the future of museums, which was complementary to our debate of today, and which was co-opened by Professor Garlandini, to whom I hereby renew my profound thanks. The debate enjoyed the participation of 12 museum directors from all over the world, including Mrs. Jatta and Mr. Piotrovsky, whom I greet warmly. The debate showed us that the urgency, the complexity and multitude of challenges that museums face due to their different financial and institutional structure and regional contexts. The debate also highlighted the two powerful enablers of digitization and education, and also reiterated the essentiality to strengthen bonds between communities and throughout international cooperation. And most of all, it underlined the urgent need to strengthen policy support and funding for museums in order for them to resist to the dramatic loss of income and ensure museums' preservation and transformation. Dear colleagues, dear friends, and distinguished guests, it is clear that a full post-pandemic recovery cannot be achieved without the cultural sector and the museums. Again, I am fully aligned with what Professor Garlandini has said. I'm fully aligned with his appeal. UNESCO is deeply committed to enhance its support for museums against the impact of pandemic. So within the next days, we publish the Global Report 2021,
Yep.
Museums around the world in the face of the COVID-19. For UNESCO, the challenge is twofold. One, to protect cultural heritage and cultural diversity by supporting museums, institutions, and cultural professionals on the one hand, and the second, to guarantee access to culture for all. These challenges can only be met within the framework of ambitious cultural policies aimed at helping museums to overcome this crisis and protecting, improving the status of museums professionals and collection. To conclude, I look forward very much to the rich debate today, for your insights and enlightening on the most defining issues of our times. And I reiterate my grateful thanks to Icom for this great opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lazare Lodou, for your information, your support. We very much need the support of UNESCO in our global fight in favor of culture, of heritage, of memory at the end. Now let me present a few data, a few figures to give the frame of the theme which we are proposed to today, to have information from from you. Let me share my screen and let's see if it goes well. I'm sure you are already seeing my screen. So I will show you a few slides only on the impact of COVID-19 in European museums. And of course, we are all aware more or less about what is happening during last year up to now. We are asked to stay at home. Museums have been closed in different moments during last year, and many of them are still closed now today in Europe. There were reports on dramatic impacts of these on museums, mainly to begin with, is more visible. The number of visitors, between 70 to 80% of losses in visitors, but also, of course, then in activities and so on and so on. I will not, there were 2 Icom surveys done in 2019, 2020. We are now, I'm the information, Icom is also preparing another third survey to see this year how things are going out. But the global numbers are known. I will not, Alberto Garlandini already referred several, but in April, May last year, almost all museums in Europe were closed, and the work was less than 10% on site. Another important idea is the reduction of programs. That at that moment in the year, April, May, 80% of reduced programs of activities. And also a significant figure for us today maybe is the increase, the very important increase in about 50% of the museums said that they have increased social media contents activities. So also then by the end of the year, we are now seeing the second survey, September, October. The situation apparently was completely the opposite. Museums were open in large part. in place work was already the normality in museums, and but still the expected loss was very dramatic. 74% of museums answered to Icom that they were expecting to have loss in revenues. Also, NEMO made a very important survey, as we all know, with very impressive figures, identical in a way to the ones of Icom, with some details more here or there, which were not covered by Icom survey. 6 in 10 museums responded that the income loss mainly stems for tickets, not selling tickets. 66% responding museums report that they have received emergency support from governments. And almost 7 in 10 museums expected budget cuts to stand for years. Then another important figure which we have to keep in mind, the recourse to digital and to virtualization. You see here we are showing the Google trends, the queries in Google, the trends of searching several topics. And as you know, there is a dramatic peak in searching Google by virtual museum in March, April last year is the peak, the top. With the decrease, also the very dramatic decrease of searching museum near me. If we take these two variables, one standing for the virtualization, the digital, the use of these new technologies, which are now also using now, and the other one, museum near me, as the more classical way to perceive a museum, to search for a museum near me. It's for many, if we were to present this chart only up to March, April last year, the world had changed a lot. But then you see after that, up to today, the small chart represents the evolution up to today. And we see that the searching in Google for virtual museum has decreased so dramatically as it has increased. And the search for museum near me is slowly beginning to reach levels which are not yet equal as before, but they are approaching. So it is not at all evident that the appeal for virtualization will, in the long term or medium long term, substitute at all the idea to visit in place museums. And we as professional museums, we must be happy about, I think. I myself, I'm happy about. And then there is also another dimension of digital, which is really important. We have to stand and to develop a lot digital. We did a lot this year and before, of course, but this last year. But digital also divide. And here there are some, from an UNESCO report, some ideas which we have to keep in mind. About 1/2 of human population, more than that, doesn't have access to digital. In Europe, there is a dramatic gap between rich and poor countries inside Europe. 1 to 3 in what refers access and use of digital with wide branch. So digital, besides other problems, has also this societal dimension which we cannot avoid. You see here from the UNESCO report on the situation of museums, which is the third and very important report which we got last year, the idea that in Africa, for instance, only 5% of museums had access to really good internet connections. And there are other figures there, key trends from the UNESCO report, which we have always to keep in mind. In Europe, speaking specifically about Europe, according to the UNESCO report, has about 73,000 museums. In the whole world, they are about 95,000 museums. So it is very evident that museum is a kind of landmark of Europe. Of course, it is global, it's universal, but let's face the reality. By far, the most part of museums are located in Europe. And this is very important, this figure, this European figure, is very important for us to keep in mind, because we are here today addressing only a very, very, very small part of European museums. Luckily for us, most European museums are small museums which are connected directly with communities. And they are suffering as communities are suffering, no more nor less than that. And they will survive because at the end people will survive. But the biggest ones, those which are for most people the landmark of Europe, those are really the ones which are facing more serious difficulties. I myself in Europe, I myself in Icom, we all in Icom, we are concerned with all museums. In Icom Europe, I'm developing important programs on community museums, small community museums, because they are by far the major part of museums. But this doesn't diminish in any sense the specific problems of those very big museums, that's why we choose this theme today. And you see, really, in fact, really museums, big museums are the European landmark. If we take these last figures from the Global Attendance Report 2019, before the pandemic, we see, if we consider the top 20 of most visited, not museums, thematic parks in the world, only one is in Europe. And is an American franchising, Euro Disney, near Paris. Global attendance to thematic parks in the world was 218,000 million people. Sorry, 280 million people. Europe only less than 10 million people visited these 20 top thematic parks. So it is very evident that thematic park, Luna Park, is not our business, is not our mark in Europe. We are a continent much more of museums and monuments than of Luna parks and thematic parks. And this is very evident when we see the top 10, and I will end maybe with this, the top 10 of museums in the world, the top 20 of museums in the world. And you see here, you have 9, if I counted well, some years it is 10 or 11 European museums within the top 20. And the figures are much more balanced. The top 20 of museums in the world have attracted about 101 million people, and more than half of that are in Europe. So it is much more balanced than Luna parks or thematic parks. And this allows us to really, of course, this is organized by Icom Europe. We are confronting ourselves with a really identitary dimension of Europe, monuments and museums. What the impact of COVID on museums in Europe? Well, it all depends on its size and its funding. And of course, very big museums with private funding are in the worst situation. Very big museums with still some public or complete public funding, they were not well maybe before, but they are so much worse now. And this put us the final challenges for our webinar now, which we have informed before. These questions: will the pandemic crisis originate consequences in being a big museum? Will these museums, special the ones that in recent years took the new market-oriented directions, turn back to basics in a sense, again, namely to consider their mission as essentially to promote citizenship? Focus on mass tourism will diminish. Temporary and traveling blockbuster exhibitions will reduce, and in case where it happened the opposite, will permanent or fundamental galleries return to their traditional centrality and maybe be reconfigured? In which senses? How will digital remote offer articulate with in local visiting? And finally, what about management and funding? Will public state-dependent models be relaunched? Will we get to find money alternatively in other sponsorship regime? That's the difficult questions for the future. And I hope, besides addressing your own, each one's situation, current situation, I mean, you could also give us your glimpse on how you perceive the future relating these very difficult, I dare to say, questions. That's all. I hope not having been too long, and I will immediately pass the floor to our first speaker. It was previewed to be Dominic from the Louvre, but before the beginning of the seminar, we have arranged between ourselves to be the first speaker, Barbara Giatta, director of the Vatican Museums, which has some difficulties with time. Thank you, Dominic, for accepting to change the order, and thank you, Barbara, to be with us, even if with your difficulties in timing, I mean, in time. So the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, and good morning to everybody. And I would first of all thank Icom to invited me to this important seminar in his person of Alberto Garlandini, but also Luis Raposo, that I'm honored of this invitation. I'm very sorry, and I thank Dominique to have left me. The position today is a sad day for the Vatican Museums. It's not the pandemic, it's because yesterday Gianluigi Colalucci has left us at the age of 91 years old, almost 92, the great and the master of the restoration of not only of the Sistine Chapel, but of many, many important restoration projects of the Vatican Museum. So I will attend the funeral in half hour, so I'm sorry I can stay with you only for a certain part. Then I hope to come back and be with you with the discussion. I totally agree of how it was said, not only in our UNESCO seminar, but also about all the report that Luis Raposo just showed us. And I don't know if I have to answer immediately to your questions, or maybe, oh, okay, but because I just want to focus on how are our problems for the Vatican Museums, and how we tried, and we are trying to solve it and try to keep going. We are in our third lockdown, closing of the museum. Today, probably we will know that our closing that was supposed to be after until after Easter will be longer, probably by the end of the month of April. As I mentioned already, we are not obliged to do what Italy is doing, but we are part of Italy. We are an enclave in the Italian country, and so we want to follow what are the pandemic issues of Italy, and so we are following what Lazio region is doing, and so we are closed since the 15th of March. We had two major big lockdowns. The first one, of course, was much strict and much more painful for everybody, because we were not organized. We were not expecting the situation, the problems, and so we were not in presence, and we worked from home. Apart from myself and a few other people, we worked, and we tried to do from home what it was possible to do. We had, as Luis Raposo showed, an immense increasing of our contacts in the social medias of the Vatican Museums. In that very strict time. When we reopen, of course, this went down, and we reopen showing what we have done.
There are some difficulties in hearing you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
There
Okay.
are some cuts. There are some cuts, but generally, yes.
Okay, I try to be like that. Can you hear me well, Meta? Okay. When we reopen, we try to reopen in a sense of showing and presenting the museum not only for the collection and of what we usually have, but also with some special projects to keep the visitors, of course, local visitors, because Rome and Italy was still in a tough moment in terms of tourism, and it was very interesting because it totally changed the usual presence. We had the 80% of local people, Italians or Lazio people, and only the 20% of foreigners, exactly the opposite of what we were supposed to have. Of course, we had a loss of the 80% comparing to the year 2019. So it's a disaster under the economical point of view for our museum, which is a museum that survives thanks to the entrances. We are a state museum, but we finance the state. We are not financed by the state. So it's a very complex situation economically. I'm laughing, but I don't have to laugh, but I try to be anyhow positive, comparing and respecting the situation. When we had to reclose on the 6th of November, of course, we were already organized, and we tried to organize the people in presence in a different schedule during the day and during the week. And so we were able to not only keep going a lot of digital and project, but also the maintenance works were undertaken in this time. A lot of security system projects that we generally were not able to undertake because of the difficulties of working with an immense flu that we used to have. I saw that, of course, we are, after the Louvre and the Museum National of China, the third most visited museum according to your numbers. So I confirm that. We were nearly to have 7 million of visitors per year in the year 2019. We just picked that. And my real problem was to have too much visitors. And joking the other day, we said with other major museum director that we were all together in discussing in a conference 2 years ago concerning the big flow and the big tourism we had, and our problem and the Hermitage or the Louvre or the Metropolitan or the National Gallery problem was to have too much people. And in fact, we were we were in the Vatican, so they said the miracle was done and no more visitors. So speaking seriously, I must say that we are now trying to survive. No staff has been dismissed. Nobody has left his job. Is a decision of the Pope of last week that we only the staff, the high staff position, and the cardinals have a deduction of the salary, but the general people. This is another issue, very, very important. I don't know if we can discuss also this, but we are still all in our position, and so this is fine, but I don't know how long we can survive. Hopefully, but we are the good news that we are all vaccinated, and so when we had reopened on the 1st of February, we reopened in a very much more comfortable situation, because all the staff and all the Vatican City state employees are already vaccinated, and so it's a safety for ourselves, but also it's a safety to the people we are working on. Many issues, of course, but what I would like to say that, of course, we have to redefine our exhibition program. We have to refine our projects in terms of economical sources related to our normal life, and so we are really in a tough moment, but we are still working. We are still want to do, and I look in an optimistic way for the future, because we have to do so. And so I think is for sure, of course, museums have changed, but have changed not necessarily in a bad way, in the sense that for sure the visit nowadays is a visit very deeply and very careful and very profound visit when you come to us. So I'm not speaking about the economical issue, but for the kind of visit nowadays, when we were open and when we will reopen, it's fine. And another major issue is that we are now looking at priorities, and looking at the priorities means to focusing on several subjects and several projects, and means that you do care probably most comparing to the to before what is really important. Exactly. Okay, I don't want to take much time. I have 10 minutes, and I'm sorry I have to leave you, but I'll try to come back. I don't know if I was clear to express our situation, but I hope so. Okay, bye-bye, and thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Barbara. You have been very clear and also very useful for us to think about, because it is really a very peculiar situation. It's not state funding, it's not also private funding, but is very much dependent on tickets and on visitors, the budget. So it's very, and with the collection you have, so which is world treasures or world treasures. So it is a very important experience to think about. In many countries, in some countries where private funding was already very much developed, is in a way easy, not easy, but to return back to state funding, but not in Vatican is much more difficult than that, because so it is very important as an experience to think about. Thank you very much. If you are then later on allowed to return back, you will be welcome. Now I pass the floor to Dominique Defont-Reos, Director of Mediation and Cultural Programming at the Musée du Louvre, which we have to emphasize and to recognize it is the most visited museum in the world. Thank you very much, Dominique, to be with us and to accept to change this first order of speaking. Thank you.
No, thank you
so
much, and thank you very much to Alberto and to Icom Europe to have invited me to this symposium. I think it's an opportunity to be all together and to discuss about the issues we are all facing in our museums. I must say, for the Louvre, just a very few words about the situation. As you know, we were closed in the spring 2020, and then we reopened between beginning of July 2020 up to end of October. And we have been closed since the end of October, still up to now. And as all other French museums, we don't know exactly when we'll be able to reopen again. We are waiting for that, but we don't know exactly when it could be. I hope it will be in May, but you know, it's something we don't know. Of course, we used to welcome around 10 million of visitors per year, and that's what we welcome 10 million of visitors in 2019. In 2020, we welcomed 2.2 million of visitors. So of course, it's a drop. It's clear enough. Nevertheless, as Barbara said, and it's the same for us, the people who came, and between July and October, when we were open, the people who came were maybe new people in a way, many French people, many European people, And in a way, we discover a new Louvre for us, a local Louvre, if I may say so. And when I'm speaking about local for Louvre, it's not only, of course, Paris and not only France, it's Europe. And it was, of course, different. And as also Barbara said, people were willing to have quite a thorough visit. They were wanting, and it's very interesting because they were seeking a long visit, and they were also seeking to be welcomed by people. And that's very interesting because, as you may know, we have been meeting a very tremendous success of our website in the beginning of 2020, because the frequentation of the website was more than 12 times more than it used to be. So it was wonderful. We had more than 10 million of people in the spring 2021, in fact, visiting our website. And then we didn't know exactly what to expect of the people. And something very interesting is the fact that after having seen the museum and its collection on the website, they were looking for, of course, the works of art themselves, but they were also willing to meet people. And something we have been creating at the Louvre at that moment, and I hope that we'll be able to renew it when the museums will open again, is the fact that we have now free visit open to anybody 10 times in the day on 8 different places within the museum, with mediators and people, you know, that anybody can come at any time, and it's a free visit and a free mediation and interpretation visit. And it met a tremendous success, and it's something we want, of course, to do again. So maybe something I can say, speaking about big museums, used to be powerful. Now, big is maybe to be fragile, but maybe to be fragile is also an opportunity for us, because we are forced to reinvent ourselves, to also to be open to a public, and especially for the Louvre, who did not come anymore to the Louvre because they were fearing of the long queues of people coming, of many tourists. Now they are willing to come back. And it's also, I think, certainly an opportunity of broaden the way we are dealing with collections, and dealing also with the story and the storytelling of the museum itself. And so we are closed. We have been closed since end of October. I don't know when we will reopen. So as many of you, we are also currently focusing on our website resources. We are just launched a new website. It was last week, and also a new collections website with all the collections of the Louvre available on the website. I will put the link in the chat box, and then anybody will be able to see our new website and the new collection website, and all the collections of the Louvre are available on the website, and not only the collections presented in the galleries, but also the collections in houses. So it's a new thing, and it's already meeting a tremendous success. I don't know what the future will be, and I think maybe it's too early to see what we will do or what we will not do. But I think that we have been showing collectively, all the museums, we have been showing that we will be able to be creative. And it was not exactly the term that people would have qualified us. We were not seen as creative institution. We were seen as many other things, powerful, and I don't know, maybe sometimes boring institutions or old institutions or whatever. I don't want to know, by the way. But we have shown that we are also creative. We have shown also that we are not only bridges between society, as Alberto said, but we are also windows, and windows open to the world, but also opens to our collection. And I think it's very interesting. We have also shown that we are a place for narration, for narrative, and for storytelling. and that, you know, museums are not only place to learn, but also place where you can discover, you can imagine, you can experience yourself. And I think that all this storytelling, all this narrativeness is very interesting, because it also, I think, meets the desire of people of today to be full of stories together. And Lazare was speaking at the beginning of the fact that we need to be put together. And I think it's very important for us, big museums in Europe, to be closed to the all the part of the world. And it's also our missions. And to give stories to the world is certainly a good way to develop ourselves and to also promote a new way of looking at museums. And I will, that's the reason why, for instance, at the Louvre, we are doing a lot of podcasts, new podcasts, a lot of videos, of films, and of lives. We are also putting live concerts, live lectures and different things on our website, and showing how creative and active we can be. Still, there are two issues. One was been speaking is, of course, the issues of finding new sources and new sources of income. We are a state-funded museum, as you know, but still, we were used to have more than half our whole budget composed from outside resources. So we need new sources of income, and you have to think about that. But the other issue, and maybe I want to conclude on that, is also an issue in terms of management, in terms of human resources, because we are feeling the fact that for the teams within the museums, it's not that easy to change. And we have to prepare them to change, because of course, certainly we will keep in the future to have both virtual resources and virtual visits, and also, you know, current and ancient visits in the museum itself. And we have to prepare all our teams of the changes. And it's not an easy way. The museum is closed, but many people are working at the museums, but still many other people are not working anymore within the museums because it's impossible for them to come because of the sanitary situation. So we are facing a quite important issues in management. And we certainly have to think not only to our public, but to think to our public with our teams. I think that, you know, I was speaking about windows, Alberto was speaking about bridges, and the bridges are also to be crossed over, and the windows have to be open all together with our teams. And us as the managers, directors, president, we need to be as close as possible to our teams to prepare them also of certainly what is be a new story for museum, but a new story that we don't need to fear. I'm not fearing anything. I'm not afraid of the future, but we have to build this new future than to say that museum are our past, and it's certainly the future of Europe. And I'm sure of that. So I'd be happy, of course, afterwards to discuss with you. And I will put on the chat the links for the new website, which is quite a success, and also the new collection website. And thank you all for listening to me, and thank you. I'm very pleased to be with you this afternoon. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dominic. I will pass immediately because I know it is a very narrow period of time to be with us. I don't know if it still is with us. James Bradburn from the Pinacoteca di Brera, because he sent me a message saying that it was really at the limit of his time. Maybe it's not already with us. Let's see if we can return back later on. So just to say a brief, very brief, before passing to the following speaker. Again, you have shown us a very special, in a way, we could expect that situation on regarding the different dimensions, visiting new kind of visitors and new type, better quality of visiting now than before. But the price for that we have to see which is the price, and then the idea of bridges and windows. We could say, maybe adding that we have a bridge over troubled waters, to remember an ancient song, or windows to the very stormy times. So we have also to keep that in mind. I will pass immediately now to, and again I ask you, the ones we have entered, which have entered later, to keep in mind the comments which you are hearing, because at the end of all speakers speak, of their interventions, we still can have time for commenting, each one commenting others' ideas, whichever host during the presentations. So I will pass immediately after to Sarah Saunders, Head of Learning and National Partnership at the British Museum. Please, Sarah, the floor is yours.
Hi there, everybody, and thank you so much for having me today. I'm just going to share my screen.
Sarah? Okay.
Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we hear, yeah. And we
Great. That's fantastic. I'm just going to share my screen. Can you now see my full presentation? Hold on a second. Great. Okay. You should be able to see that now. Thank you. Fantastic to be with you all today. On March 18th last year, the British Museum closed to the public. We reopened between August and November last year, and then closed again for the further 2 lockdowns. And we've been closed for 298 days, the longest peacetime closure ever for the British Museum. And in order to protect jobs at the museum, we used the UK government's job retention scheme, and staff were furloughed, and that has really helped us to protect the museum family of our staff. Visits to our permanent collection have now to be ticketed. They weren't previously, but they remain free. And this image shows the museum during the pandemic last year and early this year. This has all now come down. The colonnade was having some capital works done, and that was able to take place during that time. Staff areas remained open. We managed to keep them open back of house, but with COVID secure measures, and most staff are working from home, and most staff still are working from home now. Ensuring that staff and well-being has been a real priority for the museum, as well as obviously looking after our amazing collections. That has been supported in many ways, the staff health and well-being, through particularly communication, really good communication from the director and from managers, and also from our HR department, really fantastic work on that well-being. Prior to the pandemic, this was more like what you would see in the British Museum on a Friday night. Loads of people. This was a meditation event, and that really important sense of community, of people coming together, and our cultural spaces being so vital to everybody. So we, the most popular visitor attraction in the UK prior to the pandemic was around 6 million visitors, and 10 million people saw our collections around the UK. Quickly, when the museum closed, we put together some groups for recovery of the museum, and put together a 4-phase plan. So very much putting that emergency plan into place as soon as we could. And we adopted a test and learn strategy. So we would try things and then roll them out as we went forward. So this led to a really positive team spirit for the staff in the museum, and that has been really vital to our survival through that time. The press and marketing, learning and digital put together, curated together all of our really fantastic online content, so that you could watch films, visit the museum virtually through Google Street View, things like that. We've redesigned the permanent collection route for visitors. We did new signage around the museum and had a one-way route, and just opened ground floor. And when we reopen, we hope in May, we will try and open those upper galleries as well and get those back open to the public. We provided free commentary through QR codes, and also family activities. That was really important, getting families back in August, and they did come back, which is so encouraging. Our exhibitions, we changed from doing 4 major exhibitions to 2 last year, Tantra and Arctic. This is our Arctic exhibition you can see here, both delivered COVID safe. Tantra is open for 55 days and Arctic for 27. And COVID secure measures applied back of house as well as front of house, with restricted capacities during installation, more flexible loan arrangements, and increased use of Zoom and WhatsApp. Here you can see lenders online supervising the installation of one of their loans for Tantra. And the real learning, I think, for all of us was that worldwide reach of our enhanced online offer, with over 1.2 million people, for instance, seeing the online curators tour for our Arctic exhibition. Normally that would have been seen by tens of thousands. It was seen by 1.2 million people. And this is a shot here of, we're doing a 360 of our Arctic exhibition to be released in April. And that's to give longevity to that exhibition that was only open for a very small amount of time, an exhibition that was co-curated with people from the Arctic, and so fantastic and really important show. So many of our national exhibitions across the UK had to close, but we worked really closely with partners to reschedule work, and also with partners like this, the Great North Museum in Newcastle, who did a fantastic virtual version of our ancient Iraq exhibition, which you can see online. And you can even donate in that, and that idea of income generation online, how do we do that? There were some really good examples. We also switched to online events fairly quickly, and we did that by training staff, by getting trainers to actually train staff in online event delivery. Really important to upskill those staff in something they've never done before, and that was really successful. Schools were no longer able to visit, and we have 323,000 school pupils a year. So we really wanted to do something for schools, for learning. And we increased our webinars to schools from 6 per week to 33 per week. And since September, we've reached 8,000 school pupils through that. We also created a new YouTube channel just for events, which has been really successful. And since August, we've run over 30 live events online, engaging global communities in excess of 100,000 people from over 50 countries. And here they are here. And that programme has provided valuable forums for our staff to interact, our curators to interact with the public, and also lots and lots of different guest speakers from across the world, from tantric Buddhist yogis, Indigenous Arctic elders, and climate youth activists. And the responses to here's some of those people here, and live music as well from across the world, which has been really fantastic. These are some of the comments we got of those events. So, just let me read that for a second. So what are we going to do? What are the consequences of the future? So the short term, like preparing for opening in May, and getting people back in the building. We want to get schools back in the building. We feel that that visit is so important, that actual visit to see actual objects and to experience a cultural visit for the young people is so important. The medium term, to be really flexible in our approach, to work with London, to work with the London Recovery Board that's just been set up. London, the centre of London is empty, and it's really vital that we play that part in economic regeneration of our cities. So that domestic tourism at first and international tourism ultimately. We can't underestimate how important that is. And long term, this is really not yet clear or easy to predict, but once we learn more from welcoming visitors back, welcoming people back this year, we'll have more intelligence, and that will help with long-term planning. So have museums to be reinvented as a consequence of this crisis? I would say it's more of a iteration of the design, it's innovation that is required rather than total reinvention. We have an amazing, we should use all our skills and knowledge and experience to understand what the future is going to look like. But all of those things that the other speakers have said so far, those, that is important to the recovery of our communities locally and nationally, and we can play a really important part in that, and also in extending those important global conversations about important topics like things like climate change. We've got an incredibly important part to play in all of that as well. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Sarah, for your input also. As we all know, the UK experience regarding big museums, national museums, is somehow peculiar, beginning with the free entrance, things like that. Is not unique, of course, but is very special. And it is always important to see how this dramatic diminishing in visitors could have impact also in public policies towards museums. So thank you. I think we all noted some of your inputs, and maybe we'll return back to it in the debate period. So now I present, and I have the pleasure to give the floor to Michael Piotrovsky, Director General from the Hermitage Museum. Thank you to be with us also. We are really with very heavy museums in Europe, our landmarks, as I said at the beginning, and the Hermitage is among the top of the landmarks in Europe, of course. So thank you very much to be with us, and the floor is yours, Michael.
Thank you very much. Sorry for being a little bit late. We had emergency because, well, our museum is open. It was so pleasant to see British Museum empty. Empty museum, it's a wonderful thing. We have had it for a long time. Now we have not crowds, but well, a lot of people in the museum, and you are afraid of being too much because of pandemic. Well, anyway, it's time to study the lessons. One of the main lessons which from the pandemic is that what helped us to overcome the problems is solidarity between the museums and digital. It was crucial and very important. The digital is
well.
It happened. You don't hear me? Do you hear me?
There are some cuts, but yes, we hear. But there are some cuts, but
cuts. Let me try to use the earphones.
We were listening very well, but then it appeared some cuts. But okay, go ahead.
Okay, so solidarity and digital. Digital, certainly, it's very important. It saved us. We had, during the pandemic, 85 million visitors in our social media. Now, in the beginning, we have 1 million in social media, which is very important, but it learns us another thing. Museum is a museum if it is without visitors. Museum without visitors is a museum. That's why the society has to keep these museums, because museum is a storage of memory. It's first time and the last time. The middle one is visitors. So society has to keep museums. Museums certainly in these crisis situations are, I heard it was absolutely right, it's a bridge when the whole world is falling apart. But it's a bridge which there must be traffic both ways. If not, it will collapse. And also museums are medicine, very good medicine for all the hysteric in which we are living. But also be careful, medicine could become poison. If museums being too much involved in the wars of memory, well, the medicine will become poison. We have to study. Now when we know Hermitage is very much involved with Caucasus, it's exactly a place where discussion of memories becomes a little bit too dangerous, and museums must develop dialogue of cultures. Well, another thing which we learned very important for the future, that museum is really a very serious thing. It is an entertainment, but entertainment is secondary or third in museum. Museum is very serious. Museum is a gift. It's not something which is just exists and everybody has right to. Museum is a gift which is given by society, by other people to other people. And because of this, in this situation, we have a new world of the museums. What is new? The one thing which is absolutely new, at least for us, is a new scenario, new choreography of the museum, new system of visiting shifts, some limitations which will always stay. No queues now. Usually Hermitage is famous for queues. Now there are no queues, and we try to learn to avoid queues, which makes some people really unhappy. The museum by itself is a new museum which can present much more than it was before using the digital things. Now people combining visit and digital visit can see much more from our research laboratories, from our collections. Museum is open for discussions. It's not just learning. Discussions, a place for discussions, all the interactivity. It's the museum. We present a new museum. Now, Hermitage, during the pandemic and after the pandemic, people can see it much deeper, much more than before. It is absolute new visitor. New visitor comes prepared because of all this digital learning. They come prepared. They are ready to discuss. Sometimes they are very arrogant. Sometimes they will need much more to learn, but it's interesting. The museum is a place for discussions. We are not learning, we are not fighting for some good cause. We must discuss things, and our new visitors are ready to be objects or to participate in these discussions. And also we have this new way of inclusivity. You speak about inclusion. I think we must speak now about a very broad thing of inclusion. Inclusion means people with different needs. It means physical different needs, they could be mental different needs, social different needs, ethic different needs, and so on. So everything, when everybody needs something special in the museum, is in the same line. You don't see well, or you don't understand the language of art. Still, you are included, and we are working with you, discussing and presenting what we have in different ways. And there is another thing, history of museums. We must somehow learn that our history and museums history is a wonderful way of explaining the history of not only of nations we present, of your own nations all together. Museum history, certainly when you speak about the old museums, museum history is the best book of textbook of museum management and best book of management of history and history of their own countries. It's very important, and I think now when there is a discussion of how much museums must reinvent it, we must not forget this. And it's the main thing about reinvention of museums. No need to reinvent a museum. Museums have been invented once, like alphabet or monotheism, once, and they stay. If you begin to reinvent it, you just have another things, and we have a lot of other things which can be called museums, which are like museums. But museum, it's a very special kind of social being. And there is a permanent question, which is not only a question, but a principle which is much introduced now, that museums is not about what it wants to tell, but whom museum must tell, to whom it must tell. I think it's not the right idea. Museum must tell what it thinks is important to tell, but he must tell it to everybody, and he must translate what it knows, what it has in different languages. Well, this is inclusion, different languages to generation Z, to generation Y, to generation H, to generation baby boomers, and so on. For everybody, museum can speak different languages for everybody, but museums must know exactly what museum knows and what it wants to show, and it must be a principle developed by museums itself. It's another thing. We survived ourselves, so we can always demand some more autonomy from society. We are working for society, but society must listen to us carefully. We know we can tell things which nobody else can tell. It's a little bit arrogant, but big museums are arrogant. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mikhail. You have been with strong arguments, and I dare to say that in a sense provocative, in a good sense.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
claiming that museums are arrogant is heavy to say, in this time especially. But I agree completely with you that at the end of the journey, what really distinguishes museums are the curatorship of collections and the good conditions of collections for our future generations. Once I used the metaphor of bridge, also a bridge for museums, but a bridge with a 3 pillars bridge. The central one is the curatorship. Without it, the bridge would collapse. But then there are 2 other pillars, education and research. And without those 2, museums would not be museums. They could be other things, but they could not be completely museums. So the 3 pillars are, in my mind, absolutely fundamental for museums. But let us consider this kind of reason for the discussion, for the debate, if it occurs. Now I pass, thank you again, Michael, and I pass the floor to Daniel Slater, Director of Exhibitions and Loans from the Victoria and Albert Museum. Thank you, Daniel, to be with us.
Thank you. And I,
the floor
as
is
well,
yours.
I'm also just going to share my screen. Great. So obviously speaking to you from home today as we enter our 15th week of national lockdown here in the UK, and the 3rd and hopefully final lockdown, amounting to more than, I think, about 35 weeks of being locked down and at home and closed over the course of the past year. The V&A is still inspiring, it's still beautiful, and it's still free, which is our big campaign, but we remain very much closed at the moment. Now, 2020 for us, it followed the V&A's 3 most successful years on record, and we had an ambitious program of exhibitions lying ahead. Our most successful year in 2017-2018 saw just under 4 million visitors come to our site in South Kensington, which you had on that slide at the beginning of our talk. We had built up the V&A's self-generated income to 55% of our annual turnover. So that is 45% of our activity being covered by our government grant and aid, but the remainder being generated in-house. And this speaks to, the organization, a massive shift in the organization of the past 2 decades, to becoming a much more entrepreneurial in spirit, allowing us to do much more, but also in this context left us far more exposed to the impact of COVID than many other national museums. We closed last year on the 17th of March, and we didn't open again for 22 weeks until the middle of August last year. And we remained open again, as Sarah said, through to November, but then what ensued was a period of opening and closing in very fast succession. We launched 1 exhibition on a Wednesday, and then we closed again 4 days later, and we have remained shut ever since then. We obviously are hoping to reopen in May based on government guidance, but that waits to be seen basically with how the situation evolves. This gives you an idea of what 2020 we had hoped to look like. We just opened our Filthy Lucre exhibition at the start of the year, which was a contemporary work with an American artist, Darren Waterston. In February, we opened our Kimono to Catwalk exhibition, Renaissance Watercolors, which was a jewel-like exhibition of works on paper from European and North American collections, was forthcoming, as were major exhibitions on Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland and an exploration of 5,000 years of Iranian art and design. What it ended up looking like is this, and you'll see it's a sort of stark contrast to what we had hoped for. But the reality of 2020 was obviously very different, as is the case for all of the museums. I'm speaking today, everyone listening in, and obviously all museums internationally. We had 5 months of closure, and with the collapse of the inbound and domestic tourist markets and reduced audience capacity due to demand and social distancing measures, it really impaired our ability to welcome the public back into the building in anything approaching a normal way. And this brought a certain degree of disarray to our future program, obviously, which all of us have been grappling with, especially as our program relies so heavily on complex loans from colleagues abroad. And it also had a significant impact on our ability to self-generate income through ticket sales and crucially through membership, obviously, retail, etc. And that places the V&A in the most significant financial challenge that we have ever had in the museum's history. Our Renaissance Watercolors exhibition last year was entirely cancelled. We closed Cars and Tim Walker exhibitions early. Early on last March, when all of this began, we approached the rephasing of the future program with a huge degree of caution. We were not simply rescheduling on assumptions of when we might reopen, but when we would open with the prospect of having significant visitation. And the business model at the V&A, like many others, for our exhibitions is reliant on high demand. So we could not afford to simply reopen these exhibitions when we were permitted to do so, but we instead had to wait until we were confident on that demand actually existing there from the public. Just a few images here of some of those aforementioned and closed exhibitions that we had, Cars and Kimono. Obviously, international tours being planned for both of these, but they were understandably derailed as a result of the pandemic. Cars being entirely cancelled its international tour, and Kimono having a number of partners have to drop out of that, but happily nonetheless commencing its tour toward the end of last year to Sweden, where it now sits very quietly, waiting for that museum to reopen later this year. Other projects that were due to travel to Venice, to Moscow, to Australia, all in the course of planning for many years, abruptly halted and eventually cancelled out of our program. It hasn't been entirely bleak as we look beyond London, and there have been uplifting moments as some of our partners further afield proceeded with programs in somewhat an uninterrupted fashion. Our Balenciaga exhibition, which opened at the China National Silk Museum in Hangzhou, and we have here one of our curators attending virtually that opening ceremony, or our Fashion from Nature exhibition at Design Society in Shenzhen, or Tim Walker on the bottom left, which traveled from Belgium and on its way to Taiwan right now. And obviously there's one link between all of those. Those are all Asian cities who we've been able to retain our partnerships with through this. But obviously with projects in Europe and Latin America and North America, the situation has been very much different. But much of the activity over the past year has been quite reactive and driven by the ongoing impact of COVID, which for all of us is too unknown to plan with any significant certainty at this stage. And as we begin to look toward opening, which we hope now is just 6 weeks away, we're faced not simply with the complex practical process of welcoming visitors back again to our buildings, but with how we will continue to thrive and to be innovative for the public while we deal with these challenges that are ongoing, at the V&A, much like many other museums around the world. The visitation at the museum is currently down by 85%, and with half of our normal audiences coming to us from overseas, it's likely that those numbers will remain depressed for some time, and certainly until some semblance of international travel is once again possible. And we anticipate our financial recovery to take several years. But we are also facing the very sobering prospect that we might not ever return to the pre-COVID visitation and income that we once enjoyed. And these challenges, especially the fiscal ones, they collide with a very deliberate desire at the museum to retain intellectual space within our public program for experimental projects, for the global and for the new. And it is the sort of outcome of this tussle between those two conflicting ideas that's very much going to define the nature of many organizations, not just the V&A, in years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. You can now stop sharing. Yes, okay, that's okay. Thank you, Daniel. You also have raised the other issues. For instance, the one relating costs on assurances and traveling and loans and things like that. I think it is maybe for me, but let's see it for the future. But as I foreseen future policies inside Europe, and I'm referring here especially European Union, I think that policies regarding those issues, the supporting museums on those issues of loans, traveling, assurances of are really critical for the future, I think. And the good policies, good public policies, I mean, could maybe be reorientated towards those kind of supports which are central for museums. The costs we have with assurances are unbelievable. And maybe public administrations could have their a word to say, play to assume in supporting museums. Let's move forward now to Bruno Macart, President of Univers Science, Cité des Sciences et de l'Industrie. Bruno Macart, the floor is yours. I think there Pauline will also support in what refers to the presentation, but Bruno, the floor is yours, please. We see already the presentation.
Here it is. It's better with
you can
sound.
enter.
Yes. Okay.
That's good.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad to greet my colleagues from all over Europe, and I'd like to thank Alberto and Luis for inviting me today. Univers Science belongs to the family of science engagement organizations, which has more than 300 members in Europe. We reach every year around 40 million citizens. This family brings together many different institutions: science museums, natural history museums, science festivals, and science centers, like our two venues, Palais de la Découverte and Cité des Sciences et de l'Industrie, both located in Paris. Science museums and science centers share one simple yet exhilarating goal: bring as many people as possible to be curious about the world around them, to marvel at science, and to understand scientific reasoning. On a more political level, it is about bringing science and society into a dialogue. This is why, in the context of a pandemic, our museums are of paramount importance. I'll come back to that in a moment. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, thank you. Whether with doors half open or doors closed to visitors, which has been the case for precisely 5 months today, as Dominique said earlier, Univers Science made its best efforts to turn digital. But as everyone knows, become Netflix in a few days is not so easy. So, like science does every day, we experimented a lot by recognizing in advance the right to make mistakes and admitting for once that not everything can be perfect. Our situation is a little different from that of our colleagues who have a collection. As I say sometimes to force the line, we science centers have nothing to show. So we have to do it at best as possible. This is why we have become museums that one can touch, the so-called hands-on museums. One visits us through its eyes, its ears, its hands, and its nose. The experience that we offer on-site to visitors presupposes multi-sensory interaction with devices that only give their full potential in 3 dimensions and in the presence of the visitor. Switching to the flat screen may cause a loss in quality of our usual interactive museography. Take an example, that of planetarium shows. You usually attend them stretched out in comfortable armchairs, your head tilted to enjoy a performance projected on a half dome. How do you make that on a home computer screen? Hence, we invented creative digital solutions, from pre-recorded short science shows to live guided exhibition tours, like all of you. As you can see here, we have been also exploring new ways to link physical and digital experience. This involves systematizing the production of hybrid content for exhibitions, what we call digital twins, and transforming our events and festivals quite radically. We had to relearn everything because it is a completely different job than what we usually do. The digital switchover has led us to rethink the very format of our offer. What to offer our visitors, for how long, at what time, at what price? Should one broadcast live or should one rely on pre-recorded material? A completely new world, a terra incognita. Well, to put it in a nutshell, I would say that we are not Netflix yet, but already a bit of the BBC. Is this change temporary? Of course not. Quite simply because we will want to continue to put into practice what we have learned so far. And also because digital technology has a unique quality. It allows us to reach more people than our regular visitors. Next slide. Next slide, please. Hybrid production is without any doubt one of the consequences for the future. It is not the only one. Let's talk about science again. The crisis has placed science at the heart of the news, at the heart of our lives, and at the heart of democratic debates. We have witnessed a global moment of science in the making. We have discovered that science advances in very specific ways. It is a phenomenon that we do not usually see because it occurs inside laboratories. The past few months have been very instructive in bringing to the forefront of the media what is usually produced out of public view. Who knew Anthony Fauci's name before the crisis? Almost nobody. Who knows him today? Everybody. Scientists' voices have never been so hard, for sure, but at the same time, they have never been so challenged, diverted, distorted. Misinformation is another pandemic. We should fight against this one too. Science museums have a crucial role to play in this regard. Next slide, please. Their role is not only to spread research results, discoveries. They help make a difference between research, which cannot be carried out without debate, and sometimes without lively debate, and science, understood as a body of knowledge, forming a consensus at a given moment. We are living in a world where the access to knowledge was limited for another, where knowledge is everywhere, accessible to all on our smartphone, etc. Thus, beyond what I said previously, Science Museum's role is to empower citizens in thinking about and acting on the world in an informed, creative, and critical way. Here we are, critical thinking, which is the analysis of facts to form a judgment. Learning to think critically requires knowing how our brains work. We shall identify cognitive biases, which are numerous. Cognitive biases are often a result of our brain's attempt to simplify information processing. For instance, we often place greater value on information that comes to our mind quickly or that pleases us. We give greater credence to this information without challenging it. One example of our action in these fields. We have developed a touring exhibition called Esprit Critique, Détrompez-vous, with Le Quai des Savoirs in Toulouse and Cap Science in Bordeaux. It is a kind of a big workshop that will place the visitor in several situations at school, at a town hall, in a supermarket. This exhibition will make you a skillful hunter of cognitive biases. As you can see, science centers intend to be at the forefront of the fight against misinformation. This is not the only area in which they intend to engage, in which Universcience intends to engage. Sustainable development at large is the other area. And the question is as much what we show in our galleries as what we do as an institution committed to the ecological transition. Our engagement towards science leaves us the duty of promoting sustainable behaviors, starting with ourselves. To improve our own sustainability, we must tackle the well-known triptych: avoid, reduce, offset greenhouse gas emissions. This is no small task, and you will quickly understand why. The greenhouse gas emissions report of an institution such as the Cité des Sciences et de l'Industrie shows that about half is linked to mobility, to people going from one place to another one, to our visitors mainly who come to see and visit us. Damn it. How do we reduce these emissions? By preventing our visitors to come to our places? Certainly not. How then? I will not give you the answer because we are still looking for it. But we have set ourselves an ambitious horizon, carbon neutrality within 5 years. I'm not sure we will get there, but I'm convinced that we will do everything to make progresses. It is time to come to a few concluding words. Next slide, please. Habits are hard to break. However, it is up to us to turn crisis into opportunity by building on our life force. Universcience is currently preparing its next and new temporary exhibition called Renaissance. It invites visitors to explore possible futures based on well-known challenging dangers the scientific community has warned us about. To achieve this, the exhibition harnesses the power of fiction, immersing the visitor in free life and thought experiments set in 2023, 29, and 45. Imagination is obviously a key word. It is much needed to help us build our future as museum. I pretend to think that what I just said about Universcience and more broadly, science museums and science centers can be applied to others. It is up to you, but making our museums relevant places in tune with their times, aware of their cultural and societal responsibilities, is an edified definition of the museum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruno. You can now stop sharing the screen so that we can see each other. So, yeah, okay. Thank you very much. We all can notice that the Cité des Sciences et de l'Industrie is the only between this panel of speakers. And also, let me say, not only, but is one of the few in the top 20 most visited museums in Europe, Science Museum. And Science Center. Another one is, of course, the London Science Museum, but they are not many. And traditionally, the most visited museums, and the ones which are here because they are the most visited museums, are typically art museums. Of course, there is a lot to learn in between us. Because art museums are in a sense slaves of their collections. The collections are really the core center. In a science center more than in a science museum, maybe collections, as Bruno began to say, they can virtually non-exist or be only a few collections in the art sense of material historical objects. In a science museum, maybe the situation is different. So the interface between science museum, science museum, and museum, as I know, and science center, and center, research center, or educational center, as another, this interface would deserve to be more developed. Maybe it is also another topic for us to consider. Now I pass the floor to Karina Marotta, General Coordinator of Curatorship at the Museo del Prado, the Prado Museum. Thank you very much, Karina, to be with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You have to turn on your micro. Okay, that's okay now. That's okay.
Yeah, but please let me start first of all thanking Icom and the person of well, the president and the chair for Europe for inviting the Prado today. I have well, the regards from my director Miguel Falomir, who would love to join, but it was impossible for him. So I will be quite short, I think, because most of the issues that I had in mind, or we had in mind, you already said it. But well, just as a start, well, this is a slide of December 2019, when a performance by the artist Daniel Canogar concluded the celebrations of the Prado Museum bicentenary. And 2 months and 11 days later, the museum closed its galleries and its offices and plunged into a silence that was even more extraordinary than the previous excitement of the bicentenary. Well, the measures that we took, the means were very similar to the ones that you all adopted, and they are here. Of course, we protected the employees' health. We interrupted public activity. We made a strong effort to make possible that 90% of the staff could work online. Before COVID, nobody was able to work online at the Prado, and now everybody is, we all are. We developed protocols for the conservation of collections during COVID-19, thanks especially to Icom, that was giving us a lot of tips to do it. We were improving climatization system, and of course we made an overall cost reassessment. In terms of reaching the people, the public, we rapidly devised and launched we went very active into digital program. We were working 24 hours a day. There were days that our website was updated 5 times a day. So we worked more as if we were a broadcasting corporation instead of a museum. We developed the hashtag Prado Contigo, Prado with you, and Prado Educación. We developed programs for families, for all kinds of publics, as you did as well. We had a strong support and online participation, and in 1 week, we went from 19,000 visits to our website to 190,000 visits to our website. So we multiplied by 10. It is important to say that we closed on the 12th of March and we reopened on the 6th of June. These were the hard lockdown days, and since then we never closed later. We are open since 6th of June. This doesn't mean that we are back in the office. No, we are working at home. We go to work every day when we need to go on premises, and otherwise we stay at home. Anyway, coming back from to the lockdown days, in April 2020, our director started to conceive the curatorship for a new display of our permanent collection, waiting for the moment in which the museum could be reopened. A new display that wanted to be very symbolic, since the Prado wanted to become like the stage for a new start for Spanish society, a place to re-encounter with the best of the human culture. In April, May, we thought that everything would be over, COVID would be over in a couple of months. No? So what we did was we concentrated the most quintessential Prado in a few galleries, because we didn't have enough security guards to guard. And we prepared everything through intensive teamwork with video meetings and only a core team of 20 people working on site. The resulting exhibition was called Reunited, Reencuentro, and it is still on view today because the situation with COVID is not progressing as we thought, as we expected. So we still have this exhibition at the moment. The special circumstances that at the time allowed us to offer a unique presentation, provoking unexpected dialogues between works from different traditions and chronologies, such as Fra Angelico's Annunciation and Rogier van der Weyden's Descent from the Cross, or Correggio Noli Me Tangere with Patinir, or two interpretations of the theme on Saturn devouring his son by Rubens and Goya, hanging together. So it was very intense, very emotional too. Reunited, enjoyed immediate success, but however, in 2020, visitor numbers fell down to 75%, and so did our financial income. So how is the situation today? How is the situation so far? Well, I think we have additional challenges, as you all have. Maybe these are the major ones. So enhanced public interest in the Prado, increased visitor numbers, and of course the financial struggle. Well, with regard to the visitors' behavior and increased visitor numbers, circumstances around COVID and Filomena storm, not to forget, made it very difficult to increase visitor numbers in 2021. Yet, well, a temporary exhibition seems to be always a good idea. So we had this exhibition of mythological passions that was, we are doing it in partnership with National Gallery, and the exhibition, or part of the exhibition, was stuck in London while the National Gallery was closed, and finally we managed to bring it to Madrid, to the Prado. And well, the exhibition is on view. It's glorious. We were lucky because it was not terribly expensive to go on with the project. And of course, number of visitors increased in the last weeks. This was opened on 1st of March. Well, regarding enhancing the interest of the public, well, being online is, of course, is key. No? The most significant consequence of COVID-19 for us is that it has acted as a catalyst that has speeded up the progress of a digital strategy that was already well underway and which is now fully established and unstoppable. Digitization is now part of the museum strategy from the start of every project. It's not an additional aspect, but an integral element. In 2020, the Prado has dramatically increased its online presence. The art newspaper selected the Prado as one of the 5 best projects in the world in 2020 for social media, and the website of the Prado increased until 7 million users. In the meantime, what are we doing on premises with their permanent collections? Well, to make them, well, to attract people. Well, Reunited, the exhibition remains on display, but still 61 of museum galleries, so 2/3 of the museum galleries, are closed. The situation does, however, allow us to reassess the museum, reorganize the collections, and above all, reconsider what we want or can do. We are working hard on new presentations of the permanent collections, presentations that have very low cost, but that will refresh our discourse. Next June, we will be opening a new display of the 19th century galleries, which will emphasize some new guiding threads. Well, the presence of more women artists, the presence of social realism painting of 19th century, and also shifting the paradigm by showing paintings by Spanish Philippine artists from 19th century that were always, traditionally in storage galleries, no? So, and in parallel, our aim is to gradually reopen the museum galleries, which will continue to offer a transversal gaze on the collection with a similar spirit that inspired Reunited. But it is not easy because we have financial problems to hire security staff as much as we would like to. And finally, regarding the third challenge, so the financial situation following the COVID crisis, we took some actions. We asked for our public funding from the Ministry of Culture to increase from 30%, that was our usual ratio. I mean, we had 30% subsidy of the government, 70% we were creating revenues. Well, now we went to the opposite. We asked for this 60% to the government. Then we also intend to use, and I think this is important for the panel today, we intend to use the recovery and resilience facility to improve our digital strategy. And we are planning to start charging for some more of our online activities, particularly the special tools or educational programs, which allow us to enlarge our influence area to the rest of the world, especially in Latin America. Nevertheless, we know that working in the digital context is not only demanding and complex, but also quite expensive. And this faces us with the challenge of making our digital content profitable, which is not easy, as ultimately we are competing with online content platforms, which we are not, or nor we can be, or no, we don't aim to be. So maybe it's not that realistic at the present time to emphasize that the digital strategy will be financially profitable, but it is our mission to do it. So our future will involve devising a more efficient operational model, during which time it will probably take us some years to return to the visitor levels that we previously saw. This period will see also other challenges more closely, and this is something that maybe will come with a discussion related to energy efficiency and survival in periods of low income. So many tasks to be undertaken in these uncertain times, but with the help of vaccination, we are still positive about the changes to come. So thank you so much, and I stop sharing the screen.
Thank you very much, Karina, for your presentation. You showed a typical example of a museum, a central museum in not only in international, of course, in international level, but at the national level, a central museum, which, as you said, was depending only on 1/3 of public funding in last years, and now is the opposite, is 2/3 still
at least for this year, this coming year. We don't know what's going to happen next year. This is something that is still discussion.
I would like to raise a question for the debate coming from your presentation about not international but national partnerships. Because maybe some of you have already said that the future for coming years, I don't know, in 20 or 50 years ago, but in the next years, maybe most of the tourism will be internal inside each country and European. maybe at a more regional level inside Europe than a global pan-European level. And these partnerships, internal and bilateral, in a more small scale, would maybe be critical and important for the immediate, for coming years, for even our big museums. So I give the floor now to Taco Dibitz, director of the Rijksmuseum, which I'm sure we will also present as a different input and a different perspective. Thank you very much, Taco, to be with us. And please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. The museum, the Rijksmuseum, also closed on the 12th of March last year. We had intermittent periods of opening, and we've now been closed for 100 days, longest time that the Rijksmuseum has been closed in its history. Even during the Second World War, we were open longer than we are open now. And still the museum remains a museum. But what happened on the 12th of March? We immediately switched over to online. Everybody worked from home, like with all the others. And we started after 5 days a series Rijksmuseum from Home, in which curators and other staff of the museum told stories about one specific object. That the museum was able to change so fast was, even for me, a surprise. And what we've been thinking about the last month is we rethought the website. We made a new website, and where the web for us, for the Rijksmuseum online, was always thought as a tool to in the end reach a broad public and to bring that public physically to the museum. So in a way it was always geared towards a physical visit in the end. I think it was through the history of the website when it started, what is it, more than 20 years ago, that it was really complementary to the museum, but mainly there to advertise a visit to the museum. Even though we'd digitized the collections, etc., the structure of the website was still geared towards a visit. We are now looking more at the website as a visit in itself. And that sounds easy as a change, but it's actually a very structural change, where in normal times we are not anymore worried about not getting visitors like all the others. We have loads of people coming to the museums. And yes, this pandemic will end at a certain point, so we will have many people coming to the museums, but the website really is a visit in itself and therefore has to be structured differently. The other thing we did in the first month, we had started with Operation Nightwatch, the largest research and restoration project the Rijksmuseum has ever done of the Nightwatch. Here you see a machine that's taking the most detailed photograph ever to be taken of a work of art. I'll show some kind of small images. You can really go into the object. You can even go much further than this, but then it really starts to be on each pixel, on each pigment. We launched this worldwide, and it really felt as if you could touch the Nightwatch, and it had a huge success, mainly also because BBC World got wind of it, and it was really, it had nearly 100 million hits by now of people looking into the painting. And I think that was also one of the reasons, was this need that we have, especially in this period, to have something tangible, to be able to touch something. And even though the screen is second best, people felt as if they could really touch the painting itself. I think through the crisis, it's very important not to change too much, because you feel that you go yourself as well through different phases, and it's good to keep your course even though a crisis is happening, because before you know it, you change the entire museum and then things don't go as you thought they would, and you have to change back again. So we in the museum itself changed very little. But what we did do and what we realized, we are having to shift exhibitions, postpone them. We planned a major exhibition on the Dutch colonial slavery period. Slavery, here you see the posters already up. The museum is closed, but we felt that we have about 400,000 children coming to the museum each year, and we felt we should serve them and make them knowledgeable about this very important part of Dutch history. And we published a newspaper, a magazine about slavery and the impact slavery still has on our society, on our structures in our society. And that was distributed to about 280,000 children in the Netherlands and in the Caribbean. So that was one of the ways to also keep next to the internet, to keep in touch with children. Often for children, their only relation to the museum is the visit that they make with school physically to the museum, which is of course a fantastic experience, and they take something home. And when you give lessons on the internet, etc., you don't have that object lying in your house. And here it was really, we send it to the schools, and the schools in the Netherlands are open, and they distributed amongst children. What we feel is that for the coming years, health and well-being will be an important part of what will keep our society and what the people, what will keep people busy, what we will be thinking about. We will be very aware of our health. And we felt if we can't have people coming to the Rijksmuseum, we will go to people. Thanks to this very detailed photographs, we were able to make life-size reproductions of the Night Watch, and we travel them with our guides to the hospitals in the Netherlands, throughout the Netherlands. And that's incredibly appreciated, both by the staff. Here you see it in one of the hospitals in Amsterdam, but also by the elderly. Here there's an elderly lady standing in front of the reproduction of the Night Watch. And the nice thing is, because it's such a famous painting, that people always have a memory of it. So also we go to old people's homes where people with dementia suddenly still connect because they have a childhood memory of the painting. So there is this relationship with the Night Watch and the people in the Netherlands that's very strong. And in your question, I thought you put it very very well. I'll just look it up, which is the to promote citizenship. And I think that the Rijksmuseum has, in its 200 years history, always promoted citizenship. We are there for our citizens, and we are there to promote this unity also in our society. And I think that has only become stronger through COVID. We started another project, obviously.
Thank you, Alberto.
No.
Also having to cut.
Okay, go ahead, please. Sorry, go ahead.
Also having to cut costs, we started another project. The good thing is that when you have to cut costs, is that you have to be quite even more inventive. And we started writing letters to elderly. Who through the cities of Amsterdam and in Netherlands, we knew how to locate them. And they are letters from curators, but also from guards, from our front office, from everybody in the museum. We write letters to the same people. And often we find that they really collect them and they put them in albums and they read them over and over again. So it's also a tool to stay connected and to keep people from becoming too isolated in this period where our social isolation is already so large, and especially for the elderly is so large. And a last example, one time a year, we have a evening in the museum in which we, through the volunteers, the staff can volunteer, in which we welcome children with often with a terminal disease or with a disease which doesn't allow them to visit the museum during normal opening hours. Well, obviously this is a very sensitive group and a very fragile group. And this year and last year they couldn't come. And we've made together with a sponsor of paint for the Rijksmuseum, we've made a set with which they can work in hospital with children, and they can make their own artworks inspired by the Rijksmuseum. And that has been also something to reach out. And I think that museums really, in this time, but also in the future, we are, as you could call it, the gyms of the mind. We are places that are very important for the health of people, and we should continue doing that also after the pandemic has passed. Thank you.
Now, thank you, Taco. You have also, for instance, these examples. They may seem for some as small examples, but they are really central. In this phase, and I think they will stand for the future. These big projects with parts of the community, with segments which are specially and conceived for those people, locals, nationals in general, neighbors from neighboring countries, and so on. So I think there is one of the central inspirations for the future, immediate future in museums, in big museums. Then you also refer another much more, in my view, problematic issue. Your digital offer and the conception as independent from visiting the museum. And I wonder, that's only a question to raise too, if that is not another business.
No, we don't see museum as a business.
No, but
we might run it as a business, but we don't want to see it as a business.
Yes, but the digital offer of contents is a business.
Yeah, but the Rijksmuseum has, as the first museum in the world, given its entire collection for free online.
Yes, I know.
And we will continue to do that. I think it's also, I always say I don't see problems, only solutions, but I mean, I will only, it is a parallel to the museum, the digital. And before it was really the goal to get people to the museum, as many as possible. We've also have a limited amount of host. And I think it's very important that we see it as, for a lot of people who won't be able to visit the museum because they live too far away or they don't have the money to come to Amsterdam, it will be a possibility to still admire the collections. And of course, we wish to everybody that they can one day see it, because there's no thing as the real thing.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm sorry to introduce this problematic now, because it's better to deal with it or others during the debate. So we have our last speaker now, and I acknowledge very much Julia de Rovere, International Relations Delegate and Interim Director of Economic and International Development in the Centre Pompidou. I deeply acknowledge you, Julia, because you have been invited only a few days before, and you have waited up to the end. Of course, we all take advantage of listening our colleagues, but in any case, thank you very much. We will listen to you very attentively. The floor is yours now.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Very nice to meet you, all of you. I am indeed Julia de Rovere. I am currently the Acting Director of Development at the Centre Pompidou, as well as the Head of International Development. So I do not have a presentation. Sorry, this was very last minute. But I guess I can briefly tell you how we have been living through this crisis of COVID here at the Centre Pompidou. I hear, of course, my colleague Dominique de Fonréau at the Musée du Louvre, and from Univers Sciences, we have been living the same, at least, tempo of stop and go, as we say here in France. So indeed, we close on March 13th, we open on July 1st with great pleasure. And unfortunately, we close again the first week of November. What was quite beautiful to see at the beginning of this crisis, over a year ago now, is that, for instance, we had this amazing Matisse show opening during the spring of 2020 that unfortunately could not happen because of COVID. And what was yeah, really beautiful to see was that at that time, everybody and everyone around the world all worked together to work on better loans. So we were able to have that show, which was a huge show with loans from all over the world, move from the spring to the fall, which was quite a miracle. But it worked out, and everybody really, we all worked together very well, all museums together. We all knew we were in this incredible, never lived before situation, and that we had to all work together to make it work. So we were thrilled to be able to have our beautiful Métis show, on which the curator worked for at least 2 years to make that show happen. And unfortunately, it was open to the public for 1 week, and then it closed again and never got to be reopened. The catalog, the same, did not sell very well because, of course, the exhibition was closed to the public. And these are moments that are really tough for an institution where so many people work on such an important project, scientific project, that cannot be seen. So unfortunately, this is what we had to go through, but this is of course what we all had to go through, all of us here at Icom. We all know how wonderful it was to work all together to make things happen, but unfortunately that we had to reshuffle our entire programmation. We had to rethink all of our programs to make it work for COVID. So that being said, we were able, I know that some Italian museums were not able to reopen immediately, and we are not living the same situation museum-wise in Europe. But what was also quite sad to see is that just before the second lockdown, at the Centre Pompidou, the public was back. We're very different from the Musée du Louvre, which has mostly international visitors. The Centre Pompidou is very different. It's also a state-owned museum or a public institution. We also receive public funds, but our public is very different. We're very Parisian, very French, and therefore our public was still there when we reopened, but still we had, of course, also a huge decrease in visitors. But the public was there, and most importantly, you could see that people needed to go back to the museum. And I think this is what all of us museum professionals are suffering from. Of course, we moved everything to digital. We did it like everyone else, but you can feel that everyone needs to go back in a room and look at an artwork itself, or go listen to a debate, or go see a live performance, or listen to a concert. We all need to live this again. But unfortunately, at least, like I think everyone here, we did the move to fully digital. So of course we had the Matisse exhibition I was talking about. For instance, I think this private tour with the curator was seen over 200,000 times. There's a need. People wanted to see what was happening in our museum while we were closed. And it's a good thing that we have all these digital tools. We were able to do it. So that's of course wonderful, but I think after a year of COVID, at least personally, I cannot stand Zooms anymore or anything digital anymore, even though I really see how amazing it has been and all we have been able to do thanks to these tools. It's unbelievable what we've been able to do, and also how we've been able to reach out to so much more people. As I said, at the Centre Pompidou, we're very Parisian and we have a very Parisian audience. And for instance, thanks to all of these new tools, we have reached out to so many more visitors all around the world, which is wonderful. And we were also able to push back quite a few, but have a few international exhibitions as well. But most of these have been, again, reshuffled. So I think what we're all missing right now is this problem of perspective. We are not sure when we will reopen, if we will reopen. We all keep, and I think it's the same everywhere at the Louvre, everywhere. Everyone keeps working, as if we are opening a show right now, just a show open, and we installed it and it's there, it's ready for, whenever we're allowed to open again. But at least the staff is very committed to keep working as much as we can. But for those of us who are lucky to still are able to work. And again, I heard what Dominique said about how hard it is HR-wise and for management, because a lot, unfortunately, of our staff today just technically can't work. And that is terribly frustrating for everyone. So we need to deal with all of these new issues, the same as everyone in Europe. We had never closed for such a long period of time, not even during the war. So we need to handle this. And of course, comes on top of all of that, of course, a problem of funding, which you mentioned earlier. we are extremely lucky in France. I mean, we do have the Ministry of Culture who is helping us a lot. But as I said, I have two jobs right now. I am the Director of Development, but also the head of international affairs. And I can see how much our traveling exhibitions are still running and going, and people can foresee that in 22, 3, 4, museums will want to host large scale, international level exhibitions. But corporations right now in France that lack of perspective is really hard, I think, for absolutely everyone, including for corporations that would support us before, but today no one is sure anymore. So we are missing out on some of our sponsorship, but we're also getting a whole bunch of new ones. I think one of the most important parts of this crisis is that, at least in France, we've been able to really qualify culture as essential. Whereas in philanthropy, culture usually came after hospital, which of course it should be, and many other aspects, but culture, we were far behind. And today it's quite nice to everyone collectively all around the world realize that we all need culture in our lives, and we all want to go back to museums. And until we can go back into our museums, we will do digital tours, which are already wonderful. But it's true that, and especially for us at the Centre Pompidou, we're more than a museum, we're a cultural center, and we really have this very strong program around art and society. And today this is also taking a whole new shape, which is, how do you react to a pandemic? When Black Lives Matter happened, we had a colloque about it here at the Centre Pompidou. I mean, we also are very legitimate to talk about what is happening in today's world, and much is happening in today's world, all around the world. Society is changing, and therefore it's quite, for us, we feel privileged that we have this possibility of talking about the role of the artist in this society. How does art react to everything that is happening in the world right now? And our contemporary part is very solicited right now. We want to talk about it and want to think about it and want to build a future with all of our visitors who are digitally following, everything that we do. But this part for me is very important of how we survive through this crisis and how we're still in the crisis. It's not over. We believe in France, we might be in full lockdown very soon. So we'll see. But at least what was quite lovely to see is that the visitors are still there, the passion is still there, and I would almost like to say even more than before, and that this attachment, the way we see, and also in France, once again, we're state-owned museums. So these are national collections. They belong to every French person. And therefore, this very public aspect of our institution, I think it has taken an even wider position than it had before. And of course, us at the Centre Pompidou, we're going to close for 3 years for renovation. So technically, the pandemic came in pretty useful so that we can know what it is to have a Centre Pompidou closed for, unfortunately, hopefully we will reopen quite quickly, but in 2023 we will close for real big renovation works. And so therefore we have already learned quite a lot, and also the importance to have our collections travel in all over France, all over the territoire, but also internationally. Since our visitors can't come to us anymore, we will definitely try to do as much as we can to go to them. So voilà, that's about my little point of view on how the Centre Pompidou handled this crisis.
Thank you very much. Merci, grand merci for your attending for you being able to attend and speak to be with us now. So we have now still a few time for any discussion, debate, change of views. Maybe some. I know that some of you pointed me out that they had to leave because of other commitments, beginning by our president, Alberto Garlandini, who at another international conference, but still we are here, many. So if anyone of you want to comment, I see already Dominic on things said by other colleagues, please go ahead. Dominic, go ahead, please. turn on your micro.
Yeah, thank you so
Dominic,
much. It
yes,
was
okay.
very interesting, I think, to listen to all of you and to see and to notice that we are all in the same ship, I may say so, and all facing the same issues. And I'm quite concerned of what you said, Luis, about the fact that maybe we have to think local. And I don't know if this local is our countries of East Europe. I think certainly it must be Europe. But I think it would be great if we have the opportunity, maybe through Icom, I don't know, at the end of this year or beginning of the next year of 2022, to be then able to think how we can have these partnerships, on which lines and how to go further. I think it would be wonderful because we need to go ahead, of course. And one of the worst things that could happen to us would be to go back to the past and not to take, in fact, to take into account all what we are living right now. I think we need to have that into account and then to propose something else. And of course, I do agree with Julia when she's saying that culture was not essential. That's the word it was said in France, not essential. But since we do see, thanks to the audiences we are all getting on a website, that for people, culture is essential. So certainly we have to say not only to ourselves and not only to our audiences, but also to the governments, to the European governments, and maybe to Europe itself, that culture and museums are essential, and essential in a very lively manner, not only essential because of an heritage manner, which is of course very important. I wouldn't say anything else, as a curator, but heritage is important, but also we are alive. We are lively today. We are alive today, if I may say so. I'm sorry to say that way, but I think it's very important. So maybe, I don't know how, but I think it would be great if maybe through Icom Europe, we can organize maybe something at the end of this year or beginning of the next one to see exactly how we can go collectively further. And I have to apologize because I'll be obliged, in fact, to leave you at 4:45. So I'm sorry. I'm just sorry. But
Thank you, Dominic. It is really a challenge. We have to maybe to be more precise and more operational in pointing out possible partnership lines. When I meant local was in internal within each country, and then regionally in the European sense, but not pan-European necessarily, also regional at a regional levels. Because besides, we did a lot yesterday during our preparatory meeting. I comment that I was surprised. Someone said also that I was surprised on the capacity we professionals in each museum we managed to get to create digital contents and to manipulate all this stuff of digital resources. It was amazing for me in a sense. We did a lot. I think every curator nowadays has done a video broadcasting on a special object or a collections. So that's magnificent. But the real thing, and I remain a bit conservative, are the collections which we have in museums, and it is important to show that they can be sets of development also inside our countries. And I think in the last years, maybe I'm not fair, you can say, you can confirm or not that, but I had a bit the idea that it was easier for the biggest museums to have international cooperation than to spread the message inside each country. In small museums, and I gave you the figures at the beginning. We are 3,000 museums in Europe. Within each country, there are thousands or hundreds of museums. Small museums, local museums, on ethnography, on art, on archaeology, they should be linked in a daily basis with us, the big museums. And that I think, but of course, maybe I'm not fair.
No.
It is something.
No. Of course, you're right. I think maybe two things, and then afterwards I will leave the floor to someone else, of course. But two things. I think that what we have been doing since the beginning of last year is showing us that we don't need to, in fact, to oppose virtuality and reality of the collection. I think it's very important because it's something, in fact, I wouldn't have said some years ago, but now I'm saying that, we can, the two of them could go together and can go together. And it's a great news. And it's very important for us. It's not the same thing, of course. And to be in front of a work of art is something, an experience, wonderful experience. We are all living every day and so important. So of course, but since we don't have to oppose themselves, that's the first thing. The other thing, I think that it's true in France, but I'm sure that it's also true, in your countries, in all countries. We do already have partnership with local museums, the Louvre, but also I know the Centre Pompidou and also Universcience and the other big museums, if I may say so, big French museums. And it's something very important, and it's something we are continuing. And I must say that all the links we have been developing during these months, because we have been exchanging a lot in terms of working habits, in terms of sharing resources, in terms of many different things. Of course, not traveling because we are not authorized to, but many other things. So I think that there are already, and maybe Icom France could help you. Of course, Juliette would be happy to help you to maybe give also a kind of a basis of this debate, which is of course very important.
Okay, of course I agree completely with you with both remarks. Digital and material are complementary, they are not opposing. My question is not on the advantages to complement each other, it's on the business model of each other. Meaning museum is, let's say, a business model, an institutional model, and the digital offer is another is a business by itself. And if it is not linked directly to the museum, to the visiting of the museum in presence, it is hard to me to conceive as a museum activity, because it is a market business activity in TV, documentary, in all that. So, but I agree with you. It is complementary. We have to do that. We have done a lot this year, and we are still maybe in the infancy of the thing. We untitled of the thing. Someone asked me in this box of queries of questions. What about friends of museums, associations of friends of museums? Did they participate? Did they, in a sense, help to keep links between museums and visitors, people in your museums? Are they active? I don't know if someone wants to address this issue. Okay, Sarah, please go ahead. And after Daniel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Our members have been incredibly important in supporting the museum throughout the pandemic, and our membership team has also done an enormously amazing job in order to keep our members engaged with what we're doing, to provide content for them, and just to that constant communication with our members. We've also been doing that with visitors like families and teachers. It's that really important, keeping in touch. And because of that, we've lost very few members. And so the next thing will be, how do we gain more members going forward? So, and that is more challenging. But we have got an extremely good base of members at the British Museum, and they are incredibly important to our future as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Daniel, please, if you want to add something, but yes, that's it.
As will every museum that is here today, created a new program to stay engaged with members through the pandemic. I would be amazed, though, if there is any organization, at least in Europe and North America, who didn't see a decrease in their membership numbers, significant or not, a decrease in numbers, simply because so much of what it is to be a member is about much of the physical experience and what that provides in terms of access, when you come to the museum. And so obviously, you know, we had lots of exclusive events online, lots of curator-led tours, lots of different ways that we would engage with our members and our patrons through the pandemic that we wouldn't normally have, because those events would normally happen in person. So as much as we increased that activity and the uptake was really significant, we have seen a very significant drop in our member numbers over the course of the pandemic. And for us, it is the public program and the exhibitions program that really drives both retention and new membership at the V&A. And obviously, in the absence of being able to visit those exhibitions, our numbers have dropped. And you know, we are waiting to be able to open our new shows to make sure that we increase retention and that we obviously get new members to come. But it's very difficult to retain that when the museums are closed.
Of course, of course. Well, anyone of you want to add some comment, reflection, advice for the future? Yes, Karina, please.
This experience, thank you, Luis, that we had members who are friends of the museum, and of course they are allowed to come without paying the ticket, the normal ticket, but they let us know that they want to pay ticket besides the fact that they are members, because they want to support the program. And it was not one or two, it was more. And well, it was, well, it is very touching, no? And I think one of the lessons that we can learn from all this, as Dr. Piotrovsky was saying, is solidarity, no? Solidarity between partners and solidarity for the citizenship. No? I hope that this is something that will last. I hope that not only going digital is something that will last, but also, well, this link, this strong link between the museum and society.
Okay, thank you, Karina, also. You know, Icom Europe, a few years ago, 3 years ago, we have launched a charter between us, Icom Europe, and the World Federation of Friends of Museums. And I remember at that moment, they had, in my view, justified complaints about the role many museums, I'm not referring the big museums, but museums in general, the role they gave to friends of museums. Usually they are seen as a kind of adding support in times of crisis, or to get money, to sponsorship, but they are not really involved, empathically involved in the museum, not only in the openings, in the exhibitions, but in the daily work of museums. I know that our work is very technical, expertise dependent, so it is not easy to incorporate people without specific training. But nevertheless, I think we could more empathically introduce our friends inside our museums. It depends, of course, on the nature of museums. Science museums is easier, maybe, because it's an hands-on, by nature, approach. But archaeology also, maybe, because there is a lot of boring work to be done with shirts. Maybe not so much art museums, but I think there is a lot of work to be done in the front of the relation with friends of museums. Well, I don't know if any one of you wants to add comments. For me, it was really a very useful panel. I learned a lot. It has been, as I said you before, registered, and we put, if no one objects, on our web page and in Icom Europe, I mean, and let's hope to see each other in person in the near future. I don't have no much more to add. If someone of you want to say something now, please go ahead. If not, we are approaching the final. of our seminar. My only wish now is that to come together, to converge in person. Our next conference, Icom Europe conference, will be in Slovenia, in Maribor, in October. And I hope to be a presential in-presence conference already, joining mainly Austrian, Italian, well, regional colleagues, of course, from Eastern Europe and South Balkanic Europe, but in general, from all Europe. The theme is living in Europe. So it's a very encompassing theme. Thank you, all of you, very much. It has been really a pleasure and an honor to count with you. Thank you. And up to an opportunity. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.